Hey everybody, this is Jim Powell from Transportation Development Group. We're going to go ahead and get started here in just a second. And this is the webinar regarding the transportation of lithium batteries and an overview of the current regulations and liability. So I'm Jim Powell with Transportation Development Group, and let me go ahead and share my screen with everybody so that you can see what's going on. Okay, everybody should be able to see this. And welcome to the session. This will be about 20 minutes or so. And I hope this is informative for everybody. Our company information is listed here. Again, our company name is Transportation Development Group. This is not intended to be a compliance seminar, so there's no certification at the end of this. It's just an opportunity to answer some questions that you might have about shipping lithium batteries, and there are a lot of them around. And you can see some of the references here that you can refer to. As far as our company goes, we're based out of Washington State, and we've been involved in dangerous goods training since 1992. I've actually been involved in dangerous goods training since the late 1970s. It was a lot different back then. But we provide training throughout the US and around the world in some international locations, although, to be honest with you, the past 4 months, we haven't really been out of our rooms very much. I was in Africa in the third quarter of last year doing training for the governments in Tanzania and in Uganda. We were training technicians and laboratory people on shipping Ebola samples. I remember thinking as we were going through the training and going through the laboratories there and you know, seeing the moon suits, which, by the way, those suits that they need in the laboratory, those are powered by lithium batteries. So you can see there's an application for training, not just with the infectious substances, but with the batteries that power the equipment, and of course, oxygen and other things. I did not think at the time, as I was leaving Africa, that I would come back to the United States and find a pandemic here. So interesting times we live in. So this is who we are. Again, my name is Jim Powell, and this is our contact information here. And we're based, as I said, in Washington State. So let's start off this discussion with the idea that, well, your product's no good. I didn't mean that literally, but if you think about it, if your product can't get to the marketplace, it's no good. I mean, you have to get it to your customer, and you have to get it in their hands, and you have to do it in an economical fashion. So a company that fails to consider the lithium battery regulations when they're developing new products or coming up with a marketing plan may wind up with some surprises, such as a surcharge on every single package of dangerous goods. Again, it depends on the type of battery, but you could wind up with a situation where you have a $35 or $75 charge per package that you have to pass along to your customer. In some cases, you might not even be able to get your product out the door in the first place. For example, prototype lithium batteries or cells cannot be shipped by air to, from, or through the US without a specific government approval. You could ship it by ocean without that government approval, but can you afford to wait the time required for an ocean shipment to get there? The feds, they don't mess around. So in the United States, it's the US Department of Transportation that is responsible for enforcing the hazardous materials regulations. And in particular, the FAA is the one who is specifically tasked with enforcement and penalties for the DOT regulations. There's a lot of issues with regard to lithium batteries, not the least of which is that lithium batteries can be a source of a fire and combustion that's difficult to extinguish. Lithium batteries that catch fire can reignite even after they're extinguished with only a heat source present. So if you have a cargo compartment on an aircraft, for example, and there's a fire, well, the captain will pull the fire bottle and extinguish the fire by removing the oxygen from the environment temporarily. If the compartment is not cooled down and there's still high ambient heat, these lithium batteries can start reacting at a temperature low enough, somewhere between 300 and 400 degrees. So these batteries can catch fire again. And then you can have a process called thermal runaway that adds to the problem, where one cell heats up, the heat causes the next cell to ignite, which heats up, which causes the next cell to ignite. And if you've ever seen videos of thermal runaway, it's like a volcano going off at times. There have been fires and situations associated with the air transport of lithium batteries. And this is why the shipper's liability can be very, very substantial. For example, there was a fine proposed to MIT some years ago for $175,000 in fines related to a lithium battery shipment. We've had some penalty cases that we have worked on, such as this one here, where this was a company that made fuel emission monitoring devices, and they had a little battery pack that was attached to this emissions monitoring device, and they packed them in these white boxes, and they shipped thousands of them out. They did not realize that the lithium battery inside there was regulated, and because of this, the company ended up with a $75,000 fine. It was pretty significant. We were brought in, and it's the shipper that was liable, not necessarily the manufacturer. The battery manufacturer is not responsible for it. It's not the wholesaler, it's not the reseller, it's the actual shipper. So when you ship it, if you're the last person out the door to basically introduce it into the supply chain, that's where the problems are going to happen. Plus, it could also cause problems for your customers. Think about your customers that need to return a product to you. They could unknowingly violate the rules by sticking this product, which contains a lithium battery, back in a box and sending it back to you. So you have to understand not only your outbound distribution process, but your reverse logistics process as well. I mean, imagine how a consumer would feel if you purchased a product and then returned it as part of a company's return policy and then wound up getting a hazmat fine because of it. So again, you as the shipper are always responsible. And there are many different shipping choices. This is one example here. This is a lithium ion battery, an accepted one in a box. And this is one configuration. Well, we've mapped all of this out. In fact, we have a product that I'll show you later on called the Lithium Battery Shipping Wizard that actually maps out each potential endpoint in a shipment. So if you have a package that's going by air, it might look one way. If it's going by ground, it might look another way. In some cases, when the batteries are actually contained in the equipment, you could have a blank box like the one at the right, and no documentation, no marking, no labeling, or anything. In some cases, you need a special class 9 label that has the black and white vertical bars and the pictogram of the lithium battery at the bottom. But in other cases, if you're shipping a vehicle, it might look completely different. And by the way, these little mobility devices are considered vehicles. So they're actually processed a little bit differently than your normal equipment that contains a lithium battery. So what are all the variables that are involved with this? There's quite a few of them. And the shipper has to make this determination. For example, is it a primary lithium metal battery, or is it a secondary rechargeable lithium ion battery? Those are important considerations, and they're going to dictate how the package marking, labeling, and documentation is going to be prepared, as will the mode of transport. Are they cells or are they batteries? And are they UN tested? All lithium batteries that are shipped have to be tested unless they're a prototype. And then, as I mentioned earlier, if they're a prototype, there's only very limited circumstances that you can ship them without having them go through the UN tests that are in the UN Manual of Tests and Criteria. So besides understanding the mode of transportation and whether they're primary or secondary batteries, you have to consider the power rating or lithium content of the cell or battery. And then how is it packaged? Is it shipped alone? That's the most restrictive way to ship lithium batteries. Is it packed with the equipment? Well, that is a little bit easier. So if you have, for example, a laptop with a removable battery, it's a lot easier than shipping the laptop alone. Well, I'm sorry, it's a lot easier than shipping the battery alone. but the actual easiest way to ship it is if it's actually installed in the equipment. So if you wanted to send an iPad to somebody, that battery, that lithium battery is not removable, and actually it makes it easier. So the big problem is loose batteries. So you'll find that there are a lot of air carriers that will reject shipments of loose lithium batteries. In fact, most of them will, as far as shipping them as an accepted lithium battery. And then another consideration is how many cells or batteries are in the package or in the equipment. It's not until you determine all of this that you can move forward to prepare a shipment for transportation. Many years ago, I started working on a flow chart. And actually, I built a huge flow chart, and it looked something like this. In fact, it was actually a lot worse than this, but I had an interactive flow chart, and I had that posted on the web for a while. Now we have a different product. It's called the Lithium Battery Wizard. And believe me, it's the 21st century version of this flow chart that I have up here. But the point is that the process flow is very intricate. You know, each mode of transport has its own set of regulations, and there are some differences. For example, DOT has a special category called medium lithium batteries that only exists under ground transport rules, and that's for batteries that are between 100 and 300 watt hours, or large primary cells or batteries. There are exceptions for class 9 batteries that are over 12 kilograms in mass, where they don't require UN approved packaging if they're in an impact resistant casing. But you have to have a government approval for this in most cases, except there are some exceptions to that. So these are things that if you have questions, we can definitely help you with. And of course, we have training programs to answer a lot of these questions. But you've also got to consider country rules. The United States has some overarching regulations that supersede some of the international rules, such as the lithium metal batteries have to have either the cargo aircraft only label on it, or it has to have a warning saying that they're lithium metal batteries and they're forbidden aboard passenger aircraft. The international rules, you'll see, are pretty consistent. This is the lithium battery mark. And in 2021, there's a new size requirement that it can be at least 100 by 100 millimeters. It can be square. Right now, the dimensions are a little bit rectangular, 120 by 110. So they have a new minimum size that will make it easier to have slightly smaller labels, because let's face it, you know, accepted lithium batteries, the small ones that are under 100 watt hours, a lot of times those consumer electronics are fairly small. Also in 2021, you will probably hear about this, and this is the lithium battery test report. This is a policy that originated in the UN, in the UN Manual of Tests and Criteria, to provide documentation for manufacturers so that they can prove to their downstream supply chain partners that the batteries or the cells were in fact properly tested according to UN standards. As you may know or may not know, there are very specific tests that are applied for lithium batteries or lithium cells. And this document basically serves as a certification from the manufacturer or the entity that had the batteries or cells tested that it did meet all the requirements. This is very handy for you if you're kind of in the middle of the supply chain somewhere. In other words, you know, you're selling your product that's using a battery, but the batteries were actually built and manufactured by somebody else. In case you didn't know, these are some of the tests that have to be performed on lithium batteries and lithium cells. So these are designed to replicate normal conditions of transportation, such as there's an altitude test, you know, a depressurization test to simulate the depressurization of an aircraft at altitude. There's a thermal test to account for extreme variances in heat or cold. There are vibration tests, shock tests, short circuit tests, impact tests, overcharge tests, and a forced discharge test. All of these things are part and parcel of the lithium battery testing scheme that is outlined in the UN Manual of Tests and Criteria. You can actually access that here. I created a short URL. It's a bit.ly, right? So bit.ly is the prefix, and then our company is TDG. So I've got here TDG UN Test Criteria VER 7, meaning version 7. So when I distribute the PDF of this document, hopefully you'll be able to just click on that link. But using the shortener, hopefully it's short enough for you to be able to just type it out on your web browser and get to that particular page. Some of the other things that are happening. So the test report is a big deal for this year. It's a bigger deal than the size of the lithium battery mark. The test report is not actually required for transportation. That's an important thing to make note of. So it's not required as a transport document, but somebody may ask you for it anyway. So I would suggest that any supplier you have that gives you equipment or batteries, well, not gives you, any source of batteries or equipment that's powered by batteries, that you have one of these test reports and you keep it on file for each one of these products. Okay, what else is going on next year? Well, in 2021, IATA, which is the International Airline Association, the International Air Transport Association, and ICAO, which is an arm of the United Nations, they are putting new competency-based training and assessment standards into effect in 2021. The idea behind CBTA, competency-based training and assessment, is this, that employers are the ones that need to determine which topics must be covered and at which levels for employee. And so again, what we're talking about here is dangerous goods training. It's the employers who must determine what standards will be used for an employee to demonstrate competence in their job function involving dangerous goods after their training. And it's the employers who are responsible for periodic assessments that are made to determine that after an employee attends DG training, that they're still actually competent. So this is a big deal because a lot of people say, hey, just train my people and give me a certificate and I'm good to go. Yeah, it's technically not enough. I mean, we can train you, we can give you a certificate, but ultimately you as the employer have to make sure that you're using the employee appropriately in the job function. I mean, if you think about it, right now, the training requirement in the United States places all this on the employer anyway. So in some respects, there's not that much of a change, because the US DOT right now requires that everybody have general awareness training, function-specific training based on their job function, safety training as it relates to dangerous goods, and security training as it relates to dangerous goods. So all these things are currently in effect in the United States. So really, is this going to impact you in 21? Probably not in the US. It may in other countries like Canada. I've actually been involved on a task force with the Canadian government as part of my trade group that I'm a director of. And, we'll see how it goes. Right now in the United States, it always has been and continues to be your responsibility as the employer to train your people appropriately for their job function. If that takes 2 hours and does the job, that's fine. If it takes 4 days and does the job, that's fine too. It's up to you as the employer. Now, the complexities of lithium battery shipping involve, small batteries because they have more exceptions and they have more differences between the modes of transportation. But, it could be large lithium batteries as well. We had one client that had a prototype of a Mars rover, and you would obviously think that a interplanetary rover would need some sort of rechargeable batteries. Well, they did in fact have this, but the batteries were not approved because they were prototypes and they had to be flown to a test site on the big island of Hawaii, which simulates another planet's surface. And they couldn't get them there without getting that special permit. So that was something that people should have anticipated a lot sooner than they actually did. So always keep that in mind, that when you ship something, make sure the batteries are approved. Get a copy of that test report. Also, you have considerations about special packaging. You can't, with small batteries, you can do this. So if they're under 100 watt hours, you can get away with a lot. But if they're over 100 watt hours, they have to be in a special UN approved or UN specification packaging. And those are often marked on the side 4G, UN 4G, to show that they're a tested 4G fiberboard box. So keep that in mind. Some of the questions that people come up with, as somebody said, hey, I heard that all lithium batteries are prohibited as cargo on a passenger aircraft. Is that true? No, it's only the loose lithium batteries. And the loose lithium batteries are prohibited on a passenger plane, but they can go cargo aircraft only if they're reduced to a 30% state of charge. This does not apply if the batteries are contained or packed with the equipment that they powered. What's my liability? And what's my future liability for handling or shipping lithium batteries or products containing them? You know, you're currently liable. That hasn't changed. Your biggest exposure, other than lack of training, is vendors who may not know what they're doing, and you reship or resell their products, or a customer who might return products to you and run afoul of the regulations and then blame you for it. So what do you do if your shipment gets stopped by the authorities? If they contact you, offer them safety information, but be cautious about commenting too quickly or too much about non-safety questions from the authorities. Obviously, you want to cooperate, and if there's a safety issue with your battery shipment, you know, you want to help them out. But get time to make a response. Talk to your corporate counsel. You know, make a timeline of events, like what happened, how did this get out the door, why didn't somebody catch it? You know, get all your ducks in a row, put all your information in order before you respond to the DOT or to the FAA. And of course, you can also contact us. We can help you. Be very careful about responding to the carrier. Sometimes UPS says, well, I want you to write us a letter telling us that you'll never do this bad thing that you did again. Don't do that, right? Talk to your attorney and he'll tell you in a nanosecond, no, don't do that. Contact us. We're not attorneys, but we can work with your attorneys. Be very careful writing a confession letter to a carrier. So what help can you get? Well, we have something called the Lithium Battery Wizard. So you can go to lithiumbatterywizard.com and you can see a demo of this. And you know, that's a pretty good tool. It doesn't take the place of training, but it's quite useful. So what now? You know, you have to make sure that your employees are properly trained. You can call us or you can email Josie at my company, who can help offer some advice, point you in the right direction for training programs. We do travel around the world for training, but in this day and age, we're doing a lot of it by computer, and we have new and updated computer programs for lithium battery training for both small batteries and large batteries. So this is it in a nutshell. This is who we are. I realize this is a lot of information compressed into a pretty short space of time, but I hope this has been helpful to you. And I encourage you to give me a call. Again, my name is Jim Powell, and here's my email address, jim@dgtraining.com, or just give our company a call anytime you want. So thank you very much.